Now, decision making by the shareholders is usually by an annual general meeting or an extraordinary general meeting. Annual general meeting has to be, as the word itself suggests, has to be called annually, and it will deal with the housekeeping functions like approval of accounts, etc. Extraordinary general meeting is something, as the very name suggests, is something which will be called in extraordinary circumstances. It is either the board of directors, the tribunal, or a certain percentage of the members who will request the board of directors to call for a meeting, and the board of directors then will call for that particular meeting. As per the Companies Act, it is 10% of the members who can call for an extraordinary general meeting. What is a meeting? Meeting has two elements. First is exchange of views amongst the members and determination of majority amongst the members. For an exchange of views, there has to be, for exchange of views, the members have to be told in sufficient detail all the aspects of a particular case, and they have to be told sufficiently in advance for them to be able to form a review. The minimum number of members which will be required for a meeting to occur will be 2, because there cannot be an exchange of view and the determination of majority unless there are 2 members who are present. So if it is not a single person company, for a meeting the minimum quorum requirement will be 2. But the quorum requirements will go up as the number of members of a company increase. Under the Companies Act, depending upon the number of members of a company, the quorum requirements increase. Quorum requirements can also be provided for in the Articles of Association of the company. It can provide for more stringent quorum requirements than what it is provided for in the Companies Act. Now, if the members meet and they are in agreement with a particular action which has to be taken or particular step which has to be resolved, then they will pass a resolution. The resolution can be passed by show of hands or by voting. Voting can be by either physical, or in case of public limited companies, it can also be by postal ballot. The postal ballot becomes necessary because many a times the people who take a decision in a company are the minority. It gives the majority a view into the decision making, because physical presence is usually very difficult for most of the people. Value of vote which is cast will be dependent upon whether it's a public company or it is a private company. In a public company, each equity share will have the same vote as another equity share. But in a private company, different shares can have different weight as far as their voting rights goes. It can be possible that one share, as far as voting, has got twice the value as another share, or it can be any multiple which we can think of. Now, the resolution which is passed by the company can be a general resolution or a special resolution. A general resolution is where an ordinary majority is required, but in certain situations a special resolution might be required. The Companies Act provides for certain situations where a special resolution is required. Generally, they can be classified in 3 types. First is that which relate to the contractual relationship among the shareholders. Articles of Association and Memorandum of Association should be amended only if 3/4 of the majority of the shareholders present and voting vote for it. Second type of a situation leads to those which have the potential to affect the shareholder value. So, in cases where new shares have to be issued in a public limited company, in the case of merger of companies, sale of an undertaking, or the company making investments above a particular limit or giving guarantees extra above a particular limit of the shareholders funds should have the backing of 3/4 of the majority of shareholders. Third, relate to related party transactions. Here the Companies Act provides for a special type of special resolution. Certain categories of related party transactions required 3/4 of the majority of shareholders, excluding those shareholders which will benefit from the related party transactions. This is so because many a times the shareholder which is benefiting has a majority. Since he has a majority, and in some cases an overwhelming majority, he will easily be able to get a 3/4 majority. Another reason is that the person concerned in any case will vote and he is going to be always present, while the rest of the shareholders rarely are present in such a situation. For the actions which have to be reserved for the shareholders, but many a times the board might have overstepped into what was reserved by the shareholders for themselves. In such a situations, the shareholders also can ratify the actions of the board, provided it was within their powers to ratify it. One question which usually arises is a formal resolution always necessary for us to know that whether the company has decided on a particular course of action? It's not so. But it's not so only if but it's not so only if we can say with a certainty that there was an informal unanimous agreement amongst the shareholders, and this informal unanimous agreement amongst all the shareholders should be evidenced by a conduct by the shareholders. Normally, for the passage of a resolution, it is the equity shareholders who vote. It's their vote which is taken into account. But we have to take into account that preference shareholders are excluded from voting only because that they are not at risk. Once they also come, once the risk is also upon them, then they are also given a right to vote. So the Act provides that if the preferential dividends have not been paid to the preference shareholders for 2 consecutive years, then they also shall vote on any resolution. They shall all vote on any resolution which shall be passed by the shareholders, which is to put to the shareholders. This is so because that the moment 2 consecutive preferential dividends are not paid to preference shareholder, it means that the company is in financial trouble. Once the company is in financial trouble, then it's not the equity shareholders who are also interested in it. It's also the creditors and the preference shareholders. The creditors in any way are protected by statute. In a financially troubled company, the preference shareholders will lose and lose as much as the equity shareholders. Another situation which we have to take into account is that where it concerns the rights and duties of a class of securities, the members of that particular, where it concerns the rights and duties of a class of securities, it is the owners of those securities who should vote on it. So, where it relates to the rights and duties of a class of securities, a resolution has to be passed by 3/4 holders of that particular class of securities. And if it affects any other class of securities, then that resolution also has to be passed by the affected class of securities.